Welcome back to the Bhagavata podcast. My name is Bhrigupada Dasa, and today I'm very honored to be joined by Sripad Krishna Ksetra Swami Maharaj. Welcome back to the podcast. It's too long since we've had you here.
Too long, indeed. Time flies. It's my good fortune to be back.
And today we're discussing the 11th chapter, which I think is perhaps one of the more challenging chapters to discuss, because it's a chapter that seems to be not very full of philosophy or action, but I think we're going to find some interesting things to discuss nevertheless.
Think so too.
Would you like to summarize this chapter for us, Maharaj?
Summarize. Well, I would begin by reminding, if one was listening to the previous podcast, that the previous chapter is about Lord Krishna leaving Hastinapur, where he has been lingering for some time after the Battle of Kurukshetra. Now he's arriving at his destination in Dvaraka, which is, we might want to say, his hometown, away from Mathura and away from Vrindavan. And what we're getting in this chapter is some details about his reception. It's one of the Bhagavatam's many, what I would call, reception episodes. And so one thing interesting just in the beginning of the chapter is that Lord Krishna announces himself by blowing his conch, which, we can see if we want to speak about that. I would think he would have so many retainers who would blow their conches. Why would Krishna himself blow his conch? We get some description of the city of Dvaraka and the festive mood that prevails in Dvaraka. And we get, I think, an important kind of anticipation. There's several anticipations of 10th canto of Bhagavatam, we could say. And here, I think one is just his brief reciprocations with those whom he sees, those who are welcoming him, the residents of Dvaraka, who have been feeling so long his absence, which itself is an important theme. There's some description of Krishna's beauty in this chapter, some details, which are, of course, elaborated more in later cantos. I'm thinking of the 3rd canto, description of Vishnu, but then, of course, also in the 10th canto. And then some more about his reciprocations, his dealings with his elders, his mothers in particular. And then at the end of the chapter, there's a striking, his dealings with his mothers, and then there's just a very brief reference to his meeting with his wives. But then Shukadev Goswami seems to want to make sure that we don't misunderstand Krishna's mood when he meets his wives, because in the end of the chapter, he a little bit emphasizes that he's completely renounced, he's completely detached. One of his 6 opulences is renunciation, and he displays it although he is in this situation of such Aishvarya, such opulence, and we may say enjoyment, nonetheless, he is completely detached. Yeah, and in that way, this chapter ends.
That's a beautiful summary. I think we'll have occasion to return to many of these themes while we discuss this chapter. But I was speaking with somebody earlier today about the upcoming episode and mentioning that it's the 11th chapter. And they said, oh, how will you find anything to say about that? It's just Krishna coming to Dvaraka. I think nothing happens there. But as you just brought out, there's actually so many things going on here.
Yeah.
And I was actually thinking about this, how the previous chapter was about Krishna leaving, or we heard in the previous chapter about Krishna leaving Hastinapura, and now he's returning to Dvaraka. And many times it's said that the Bhagavata is all about Viraha Bhakti, like in Hardy's classic book about the Bhakti in separation. But union, coming together is very much celebrated in the Bhagavata as well, isn't it?
It is, and it's interesting because you get the sense that both are required. There has to be meeting for there to be separation. There has to be separation for there to be meeting, and this reminds me of a kind of analogy. I think it comes from Gaur Govinda Swami, the late Gaur Govinda Swami, that a kind of analogy with a river. A river has two banks that define the river and make it flow. On one side you have meeting, and on the other side you have separation, so to say, and then the flow of emotion, of devotional emotion, goes between these two banks, in effect. And that reminds me, though, that, and maybe you can correct me here, as I understand, in the Nimbarka Sampradaya, they strongly emphasized the eternal being together of Radha and Krishna, that there's no question of separation. They are, you could say, ontologically inseparable, and there's, I don't know, no discussion of a leela of separation, perhaps. And that to me is interesting as a kind of contrast with the Gaudiya tradition, which, of course, very much emphasizes, even celebrates viraha bhakti. Yeah.
I find this to be extremely interesting, and this is one of the places where the Bhagavatam, or the narrative of the Bhagavatam, kind of intersects with the life of us practitioners. Maybe we don't see Krishna coming back to Dvaraka, but we do sometimes feel Krishna's presence in our lives.
Yes.
Not that often, perhaps, but every once in 10 years or something. And then there's this this long separation.
Yes.
But this kind of movement between the joy of bhakti and the anguish of separation from the Lord, that's something I'm sure every devotee has experienced.
Yes, and I was thinking about this chapter in another way, which you're welcome to reject as too speculative. But I was thinking, what if we take it allegorically and say that this is describing how I want to say broadly, the yogi but we might want to say more specifically the bhakti yogi wakes up when Yogeshvara, the supreme yogi, appears. When he arrives, then the yogi wakes up. But of course, I don't know how far this comparison can go, because we're not seeing one single yogi, we're seeing a whole city of yogis waking up.
I mean, I like this allegory, and I actually like that it's a whole city waking up, because bhakti, of course, is all about community. It's never about just me and my God, but
Yes.
together we worship God. And one to my mind, one of the beautiful things in this chapter is the way how all the people come together in welcoming Krishna.
Yes.
The relatives, the famous people, even the courtesans of Dvaraka come out and greet the
Yes.
Lord. So it's
Yes.
very much like a community welcoming their
Also,
beloved Lord.
what is the word used? Not chandala, but something like that. The shvapaka, the dog cookers, literally. Even they come out. Yes. Yeah, there's, it's community. So it's, we might want to say this is Sankirtan. It's coming together and receiving the Lord. But one thing I must say I had a bit of a doubt. Maybe I haven't read it carefully enough, but it seems like on the one hand, they're not really ready for him to come. And so first they have to hear the conch blowing, and then, oh, Krishna's here, and then they all jump up. But then we read that the whole city was already decorated. They're all, on the one hand, they seem to be not completely ready, and on the other hand, they seem like they are ready. And I would almost want them to be completely ready. They're at the gates, or they're even outside the gates, with plates of offerings, like you see I've seen in a South Indian temple, people lined up, each one with a plate with different samagri, different things for offering, banana, coconut, and so on, and a deepa, and then the priest coming along, and one after another taking the plate and turning and offering to the deity. So I kind of expected, some part of me wants that to happen, but it doesn't seem to be.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I didn't react in the same way. I had the feeling that they knew that Krishna is coming, and he's probably going to come this day, but they were not exactly sure when he will come.
Okay.
So they had prepared for everything, and of course, Krishna never travels alone. When he goes to Hastinapura, he usually takes his wives with him, and they are not few, and then all of the wives have 10 kids, so it would be this huge caravan of people. So they must have known, they must have heard already that they're getting close.
They must have heard the rumbling, and there must have been dust raised and so on.
Yes. I wanted to quiz you on something, Maharaj. There's a verse in this chapter which is theologically quite important for the Goswamis. Can you guess which one I'm thinking of?
I would have to guess, but Well, one that strikes me, and I could imagine it being interesting. I didn't, I confess, look at commentaries, but text number 2 strikes me as one possibility, just because, in Srila Prabhupada's purport, he kind of expands on a kind of adhyatmika explanation of Krishna's holding and blowing into the conch. And the one is kind of changing the other. And he turns that into a discussion of spiritual material. There's no spirit, there's no material when there is spiritual, in effect. I don't suppose that's the one you were thinking of.
No, it's not, but it's one I also wanted to discuss because I also haven't studied all the commentaries, but I did read Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, and he has nothing to say about that verse. Well, Prabhupada has a long and, as you say, very interesting commentary about spiritualizing matter.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good example of how many things Prabhupada is doing in his commentaries here in the first canto. This is something we've spoken about on earlier episodes of this podcast as well. How unique Prabhupada's commentary is, both within kind of the broad range of Vaishnava commentaries to the Srimad Bhagavatam, but also how the commentary of Prabhupada to the first canto is different compared to his commentaries to the later cantos.
Yes.
He has more things going on here, as it were.
Yes, one could easily explain that also, I think, because he feels he needs to explain a lot more to the readers he has in mind, anticipates, especially with the first canto, which is so much in, especially this, several chapters are kind of a sequel and a summary to the Mahabharata. So then if someone's not familiar, the Bhagavatam kind of assumes familiarity with the Mahabharata. And I've even written something on how it can be read as a commentary on the Mahabharata. And Prabhupada saw that people who are going to read his translations and commentary, they are likely not to have any idea about the Mahabharata, so he has to explain things. And so much more they're not going to be familiar with. So yeah, I think Canto 1 and Canto 2 especially, he is quite extensive with some of the commentary.
And he also has all this social commentary.
Yes.
And kind of historical, political even. There's so many interesting things going on. And this verse that you pointed out, Maharaj, is I think a beautiful example of this, how he's expanding on kind of an aesthetic element in the verse, which is not that uncommon in Sanskrit literature, how Krishna's red lips make the white conch pink. But then he through his own bhava, he then expands on that in a beautiful way.
Yeah. Well, even the verse, the Sanskrit of the verse has, some alliteration, and it's quite obviously poetic expression in more ways than one. Datma yamana kara kanjada sampute ya tabja kande kalahangsa utsvana. Yeah. It's nice.
The verse I was thinking of is verse 9, which is a verse spoken by the inhabitants of Dvaraka to Krishna. And they say, O lotus-eyed Lord, whenever you go away to Mathura, Vrindavana, or Hastinapura to meet your friends and relatives, every moment of your absence seems like millions of years. O infallible one, at that time our eyes become useless, as if bereft of sun. Here Prabhupada actually has a short comment, but the Goswamis make a big deal out of this verse because it's one of the verses that hint at Krishna's actually having returned to Vrindavan in the meantime. Something that is spelled out in texts like the Padma Purana, but which the Bhagavatam never explicitly says, leaving us with the suspicion that maybe Krishna is an unreliable fellow. He said he would go back, but he never does.
Yes. I noticed in this verse also a couple of things. One is Raving Vinakshnor Iva Nastavachyuta. Our eyes, what is it? Are like eyes without the sun. What is the use of them? And this reminded me that there is a similar verse in Canto 10, chapter 39, verse 21. And this is where Krishna is leaving Vrindavan to Mathura. Akrura is taking Krishna and Balaram away, and the gopis are protesting. And in this case, I think they're blaming Lord Brahma. But in any case, they're seeing that without Krishna being there, what is the use of their eyes? Because there's nothing else interesting to look at. There's no reason to look at anything except Krishna.
So Krishna, he comes back into Dvaraka.
Oh, one more thing from this verse. Excuse me. He says, every moment of your absence. So this reminds me also of the famous verse in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shikshastakam. Yugaitam nimeshena chakshusha pravishayitam shunyaitam jagat sarvam govinda virahena me. So a nimesha, a moment, is yugaitam, is made into a yuga. Shunyaitam jagat sarvam, and the whole jagat, the whole universe, has been made empty, has been made void without Govinda. And I like to joke that that Gaudiya Vaishnavas were usually very much against Shunyavada, but actually we also have Shunyavada. We have a doctrine, a vada of Shunya or Shunyata, and that is that without Govinda, everything is Shunya.
So all the emptiness has disappeared now that Krishna is back, and they all get up, Balaram and all the others, and they rush towards Krishna. And before that, as you mentioned, we get a description of Dvaraka as a very majestic and an opulent, to use a kind of devotee language term, very opulent city, full of palaces and decorated as if for a great festival now. Prabhupada, in his purports, he writes about how Vedic festivals are always they are never dry. He makes that comment somewhere. There's always lots of food, and there's lots of abundance in every way.
Utsava kind of suggests that, doesn't it? The Sanskrit word utsava. I think it has something to do with blossoming. Yeah, they're always joyful. Yeah. Yeah.
This, of course, this stage of Krishna's Leela, when Krishna is living in Dvaraka, that takes up a lot of the 10th canto. We have a reading group here in my city where we go through the Bhagavatam, and we're now in that part of the Bhagavatam. There's so many chapters about Krishna's adventures while he's based in Dvaraka. Simultaneously, as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, this is the part of Krishna's life that we're least interested in.
Yeah.
Our main interest, of course, is Krishna in Vrindavan and perhaps a little bit Krishna in Mathura. But Krishna in Dvaraka kind of takes a secondary role in our meditations.
Yes. Yes.
What can we learn from Krishna in Dvaraka? Should we just kind of skip these chapters and move on, or how should we think about Krishna and Dvaraka?
Or just remove them altogether from the publication.
Yes. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that we shouldn't bother about Dvaraka, and especially
linger.
we shouldn't worship the queens. We're going to hear about the queens later in this chapter.
Oh. One thought comes to my mind is that it serves as a contrast. We understand this, we hear especially, I think this is emphasized by Srila Rupa Goswami, that there's Aishvarya and there is Madhurya, and Vrindavan is a place of Madhurya. But unless we hear something about Aishvarya, of Krishna's opulence, Aishvarya, of course, coming from the word Ishvara, majesty, magisterial, and as you said, in our common lingo, we say opulence. If we didn't hear about that, we might not appreciate so much the madhurya, the sweetness, the simplicity of Vrindavan, and we might not appreciate that Krishna is indeed such a Lord that he has all facility when he wants to enjoy such opulence, but he's putting it all aside because it's as opulent as it is, it's not as satisfying as the love of the Vrajavasis, the residents of Vrindavan. That's one way it strikes me.
So if we think about the Bhagavatam as a whole, or perhaps the first canto here, these chapters they will gradually introduce us to Parikshit, the main, or one of the main persons of the whole Bhagavatam. These chapters are leading up to his story, and all of these things, as you said before, Maharaj, everybody or the reader of the Bhagavatam is expected to know the Mahabharata. So we know that Krishna will travel between Hastinapura and Dvaraka, and we know there's nothing how should we say it, essential for the story that is introduced here. So do you think that the main function of the chapter then is to introduce us to this kind of meeting between Krishna and his devotees as a contrast to the separation in the previous one, or why do we have these
Yeah.
chapters here?
Yeah, I think it serves that purpose. It's also an anticipation. I mean, how many chapters in the 10th canto are, as you mentioned, about Krishna in Dvaraka or coming out of Dvaraka, doing various adventures. So one way I read the first canto is like in a musical symphony performance, there can be an overture.
Mm.
An overture brings the various musical themes kind of briefly introduced, and then they will be elaborated more in the course of this symphony. I think that would be one way of understanding an overture. So the first canto is like an overture to the entire Bhagavatam, and in one sense, you can even say that the Bhagavatam begins with Canto 2, Chapter 1, right? When Shukadeva begins to answer Parikshit Maharaj's questions. So that's one way of understanding. I thought also it serves as a kind of interlude. There's a kind of sense of a pause. Krishna is being introduced in chapter 8. He's meeting with Queen Kunti, and then chapter 9 he's there as Bhishma is speaking, but he stays silent all the time, and he's also silent in this chapter. It's just his form, his presence, and there's several references to viewing, to seeing, to darshan. So it's kind of introducing that viewing and seeing darshana of the Lord is very important. He has form. And it's also, it's kind of a series of pictures. We can picture Krishna being in this situation. And I think this is also a kind of anticipation of what's going to come very soon in the same canto, the disappearance of Krishna. Yudhishthira is going to find out that Krishna has now left. And of course, that brings a lot of pathos, this sense of Krishna's absence. Krishna svadamo bhagate dharma jnana divisaha, right at the end of chapter 3. After the departure of Krishna, together with knowledge, etc., what is there? Oh, there's the Bhagavatam. So it's also, I think, kind of one way of the Bhagavatam saying, so now here's how we're going to see Krishna, is through these words. So let's pause for some time. There's no big action going on. Krishna's not speaking, but we can see him. We can see how he relates with all the different sorts of people in Dvaraka. And there's all sorts of people in Vrindavan, in Dvaraka, right?
Yeah, let's come back to all these people in a little while, but I just wanted to bring up something you mentioned earlier, Maharaj. They don't first see Krishna; they hear him when he himself blows the conch. And you made that point earlier that so many people could have done that, but he wants to do it himself. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Well, Krishna is, he likes to do it himself because we could say because he wants to make a direct connection, and he wants to make it clear that it's the first way, the primary way, perhaps, of connecting with the Lord is through sound, and that sound is His sound. It's directly the Lord. But you could then say, well, yes, but it's not completely direct because it's coming through this conch. He's using an instrument. Well, then we may want to say yes, and this is anticipating his playing a flute,
Mm.
which in the 10th canto makes everyone completely mad just hearing Krishna playing his flute. So here, the sound, the principle of sound coming directly from Krishna, from his breathing, we could say there's a kind of maybe, I don't know if visceral is the right word here, but there's a sense of a certain sense of physicality, I think. Krishna is present. He is blowing this conch.
I like this very much because again, I think this is one of the places in this chapter that is quite relevant for us practitioners today. That we mostly see Krishna with our ears or
Mm.
our eyes if we're reading, but not his form directly, but rather we hear, and then the form is somehow manifested in our minds. And I wanted to speak a little bit about this because I know, Maharaj, that one of the exciting things that you're doing with your students is that you're engaging them in kind of scriptural like imagination, perhaps we could call it, or
Mm.
like writing
Yeah.
small stories about themes
Mm-hmm.
from the Bhagavatam, for example. I don't know if you ever had this chapter as an assignment, but could you speak a
Well,
little bit about this?
we don't, I don't generally give a single chapter to
Mhm.
focus on. I've been giving entire cantos, so I tell students, find something, find one verse in the first canto in this case, and write about it, reflect on it, and write. So I'd have to check um, in our first canto reflections book who responded with connection to this 11th chapter. It's been a while since I've looked at that. But yes, I try to encourage, I think there's a place for imagination. And one reason I think so is because it seems to me that as we are reading, the reading would make no sense without especially in a chapter like this, without visualizing. And that visualizing is a kind of use of the imagination. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think Jiva Goswami discusses this in Bhakti Sandarbha, the 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 difference between visualization and the imagination, or something like that.
Mm. Yes. There's, of course, different qualities of imagination. There's, in English, we have also the word fantasy.
Mm.
And the question always comes, what are the boundaries? What are the limitations, or how do we know if we're going too far off with our imagination? And I think one rule of thumb, if I remember, Rupa Goswami has written a short book on poetics, in which he, to put it in a very simple way, he says it is possible to to write, especially I think he's speaking about drama, one can take some liberties with Shastra if one is, so long as the bhava is as it should be, as long as one is getting the right bhava. So I think one example, I don't know, this may be going on a tangent, but there's this story, there is a brief reference, a story of Shakuntala and what's the king's name in the Mahabharata, Dushyanta. And then Kalidas, centuries later, writes what becomes considered to be the best Sanskrit drama of all time. Often we hear that in his drama Abhigyana Shakuntala. And he's changed the story from the Mahabharata, but it's celebrated as a wonderful expression of this of the story and of the relationship that it's exploring.
So there's some liberty for imagination.
Yeah,
I
and
remember.
Of course,
Go
then
on, Mike.
comes the question: who has the adhikar? Who has the qualification to to do this? And well, I feel that we need to encourage, even we may be beginners. I still think there's place for a bit of creativity and imagination to help us, actually to help us go deeper into the Shastra, into the text.
Will you then, if your students write text like this, will you give feedback to them then and point out that maybe here there's
Maybe you went too
the
far.
conflicting rasas or something like that?
Sometimes, but generally I'm happily surprised that they're really quite good, I think. I don't know, there's probably room for finding fault, but I'd like to encourage, and I explain in the introduction to these collections that we're just we're young and unschooled, but we're trying our best. So please be patient and tolerant with us.
I studied this book Nataka Chandrika a long time back when I
That's
did
it, Nataka Chandrika. Yeah.
my master's in Uppsala in Sweden, and I remember
Oh,
that Rupa
you're the
Goswami, he writes
expert
about.
on it.
Well, it's a long time back, but I do remember this part. He's writing about the intrigue of the story of a drama, and he says that there are three types. There are the shastric stories, the imagined or made up stories, and the mixed.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
he
that's
says
it.
mishram ramyam tunatake, that in a drama the mixed one is delightful.
Ah. There you go.
Which I as a young person very much accustomed to a more kind of, we could perhaps call, literalist understanding of scripture. This was quite surprising for me.
Yeah. Shocking. Before I forget, just one little detail jumped at me. I'm looking now at verse 13, this description of Dvaraka, and it says, Gopura Dvara Margeshu Kritikotukat Toranam. And Gopura, I always associate Gopuram with these temples in South India. And I wonder, it's just a wondering if this would be evidence from a scholarly perspective that this is being composed by South Indians. We get that argument. I think you mentioned Wilhelm Hardy. He would, I think, make this argument. I don't know if he would use this particular verse. I don't know if we would see Gopurams in North India, or whether Dvaraka counts as part of. It's not really South. It's very much West India.
Yeah. I thought about the same when I read that verse, but I've also noticed. It's not me. I've read about that. The Bhagavatam often kind of brings together elements from the geography and botany of different parts of India.
Yeah.
Like the plants in the description of Vrindavan, the different trees and flowers and creepers and so on. Not all of them grow in the Vrindavan area of today. So things might have changed, or then there might also be the kind of
climate change.
Climate change, or then another alternative is that Vyasadeva wants to create a kind of pan Indian, if you will, kind of vision of these places that are not so rooted in one part of India, but kind of everything is brought together in them.
Well, that could be, but I'm reminded, and this is again a little bit a footnote, if you like. You may be aware, but there's an amazing project going on under the leadership of Bhakti Goswami at Govardhan. And one of the things they're doing is collecting plants and growing plants, which are described in the literature. Plants described as growing in the Braj area. They've been collecting them and they're actually growing them. They've been creating a garden forest, if you like.
Wow, I didn't know about that at all. I need to visit
that's
that.
worth visiting.
Thank you for the telling me about that. So everybody comes now to greet Krishna here in Vrindavan, and of course, anybody who's read this chapter will recognize that there's a question that will come up here when we hear about the different people coming to meet Krishna. Kind of a cheeky question. If all the people are so holy and devoted in Dvaraka, how come there are hundreds of prostitutes there?
Yeah. Why, indeed. This is one verse that Srila Prabhupada gives a bit longer purport to, where he seems to want to address this. And how he addresses it is striking in a sort of sociological way, you might say, that there's a function, there's a social place for prostitutes in a society. They serve to keep society stable. It seems to be what he's saying. I would say that this is the mood of this section in general, is that Krishna is all. Krishna's the society of those who are attracted to Krishna is all inclusive. Everyone is attracted to Krishna. And the mood here is that, and no one is judged. Whatever their background, whoever they are, the fact that they're attracted to Krishna is what is important, what matters. And this reminds me of a verse that comes in 7th canto, early in the 7th canto, and again, I think in the 10th to the effect kamam, krodam, vayam, sneham, aikyam, sauridam evacha. Nityam haro vidadato yanti tanmayatam hite. That everyone, whatever their mood, whatever their bhava in relation to the Lord is, they can all become perfected, or they reach perfection by associating with Krishna. So I thought of it in that way. What thoughts did you have in this regard?
Well, I was thinking kind of in two ways. One is something my Guru Maharaj has said when somebody asked him about this many years back. Because you could argue, of course, that these women are important for society to run in an orderly way and so on. But then you could say that, well, that's ordinary society, but here we have a society of pure devotees.
Yeah.
But he said in a funny way, he said that in the Nitya Leela in Vrindavan, there are no demons, but there are rumors of demons, because they make the Leela more fun when you have to there's this added dramatic element of the demons. So he said that in Dvaraka there are prostitutes, but there are only rumors of customers. So I like that. But then the other thing that I was thinking of is that maybe they are also needed for the kind of this kind of courtly atmosphere of Dvaraka. Just like there are all these
There's always
bards.
the harem. Yeah.
There are all these bards, there are these panegyrists, there are all these kind of people connected with the court.
So there have to be courtesans.
Yes, so it's part of the kind of splendor of Dvaraka.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I thought also, and this you could connect to what you just said about rumors of customers, is jumping to the 11th canto, the chapter on the prostitute Pingala. I noted it here. Yes, it's chapter 8. Pingala speaks, it's between verses 23 and 43. And she's waiting for a customer and waiting and waiting and waiting. And it's around midnight. And then she has a realization. She has an epiphany that this is all a complete waste of time, that actually she should just take shelter of the Lord. So all of these Dvaraka prostitutes, maybe just as you suggested, they're just at the threshold of realizing, this is all about Krishna. So when Krishna arrives, they also run to Krishna. They've been waiting for that customer, that rumored customer, and he never shows up.
When he comes then into Krishna, when he comes into the palace, he meets the mothers, and headed by Devaki. And that's the first persons that he meets, and then he meets the queens. And that's, I think, perhaps the most kind of dramatic part of this chapter, how the queens react when they see him, and the way how they embrace him without actually embracing him. I thought this was
Yeah.
quite intense and quite beautiful. Would you like to expand a little bit on these verses, Maharaj?
So maybe from verse number 30, right? Atavishat svabhavanam sarvakamang anuttamang prasada yatra patninam sahasrani cha shodasha. Thereafter, the Lord entered his palaces, which were perfect to the fullest extent. His wives lived in them, and they numbered over 16,000. Something I would tell students when I was teaching in Hong Kong, and I did a course called Indian Culture and Religion Through Biography. And each week I would introduce a particular figure, starting with the Buddha, and then the next week we had Krishna. And I would tell them that Krishna had 16,000 wives. And if they remembered nothing else about Krishna, they remembered that he had 16,000 wives. Yes, then in the next verse, Patnyam Patim Proshya Grihanupagatam Vilokya Sanjata Mano Mahotsavaha Uttastur Arad Sahasasana Shayat Sakang Vratair Vridita Lochananana. Lochananana. The queens of Lord Shri Krishna rejoiced within their minds, within their minds, to see their husbands home after a long period abroad. So they seem to have been quite reserved. They're you'd expect them to be kind of quite expressive with their voices, but here it says with their minds, which makes me, to me, that supports my theory that this is can be taken as an allegory of yogis waking up. The queens got up at once from their seats and meditations. So they're meditating. As was socially customary, they covered their faces shyly and looked about coyly. Now here I can see modern people in general, and maybe those who would identify themselves as feminists, as being very concerned that all this shyness and coyness and so on, this is, who wrote this? This was written by men, and they want their women to be shy and coy. And we're supposed to believe that Krishna's wives are really like that. They might be resistant. So that's one thought. But then the insupporable ecstasy was so strong that the queens who were shy first embraced the Lord in the innermost recesses of their hearts. Then they embraced him visually, and then they sent their sons to embrace him, which is equal to personal embracing. But, O chief amongst the Bhrigus, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears. So finally the emotions spill out and they overflow. And I think that's the stronger message here, if you like, that there is intense emotion, and yes, they're cultured. These are cultured ladies, and although he's entering their homes, there is a sense of the need for restraint. And yet they can't restrain themselves. Their emotions are overflowing. Yeah.
I suppose the need for restraint is because there are other people present as well. So
yeah.
But it's also, to me, you mentioned earlier how this is, in a sense, also a contrast. All of these chapters about Dvaraka are a contrast to the Vrindavan Leela. And the queens of Krishna, of course, they love him with all their hearts.
Mm.
But still they're different from the gopis. Their love for Krishna is different. And this illustrates quite clearly one of those differences, that they are bound by all these kinds of worldly etiquette and
Yeah.
propriety,
Yes.
to an extent that the gopis are not. They would have run and hugged him.
Yeah.
But the queens, even to the extent that they shed tears, and they feel that to be kind of a failing, that they
Oh,
shouldn't have been
yes.
so emotional.
They shouldn't be so emotional. Yeah.
Yeah, but the gopis, they they wouldn't care for that.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So there is this contrast indeed. But then we are brought in these last verses to, or maybe I'm jumping too fast to the end.
No, that's I was going to do the same.
Okay. Yeah, that he is actually very detached. So that's kind of, I think as a reader, one feels like there may be a mixed feeling. Part of that feeling could be, oh, why can't he relax and express some attachment instead of detachment? Does he have to be totally detached?
Could this
And on the
also?
other hand, one feels like, oh yes, we're being informed here to remember that we're dealing here with none other than the Supreme Lord, one of whose opulence is detachment.
Shukadev will repeat this, or Shukadev will give the same teaching when he describes Dvaraka Lila in the 10th canto, and for example that famous chapter when Narada comes to see how Krishna manages to have 16,000 wives, because I'm sure your students there thought that he couldn't have been the greatest of husbands if he has 16,000 wives. He probably gave each wife like 5 minutes a year or something like that of his
No,
time.
I explained to them.
Okay.
That he expands in 16,000 forms.
Yes. So Shukadev, when he speaks about this, he makes the same point there, that he seems like he's an ordinary henpecked husband, but he's actually completely detached.
Yeah.
Could this also be kind of a contrast to Vrindavan then, where he very much is kind of under the
Under
control
the control.
of the gopis' love?
Yeah, that could be. And it could be that as an anticipation of more elaborate description of Krishna and Dvaraka. And we're perhaps, when you mentioned Narada's visiting the palaces of Krishna and seeing Krishna with all of his wives, one of the messages there is that Krishna is performing his duty as the Lord who is reestablishing Dharma. He is the perfect grihasta. He is doing what grihastas are supposed to do. He's, up in the morning and performing his rituals and so on. And from that perspective, then his detachment described here is telling us what the flavor of that tune is going to be later in the 10th canto.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this is where the chapter ends, with Suta Goswami giving us this teaching. And then in the next chapter, we're going to hear what happens after this.
So stay tuned.
Yes. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for joining us.
Thank you so
this
much.
chapter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a lot of fun.